staircases. I stopped at the trestle bents and left the cross bracing to you. When it comes my turn to build a trestle bridge, I probably will make an assembly fixture that keeps the bents evenly spaced and vertical. When I get one designed, I'll let you know. I really wanted to do staircases and do them well, but I haven't figured out a good user interface. Like awnings, staircases are a real challenge because there are so many options. Open or closed sides, freestanding or next to a wall or between two walls, straight or curved. What about landings? And then there are handrails, which lead us to fire escapes, a whole additional complexity. Just a lot to consider, and frankly, the complexity is intimidating. The International Residential Code, or IRC, recommends standards for the ratio of the rise versus the run for well-designed staircases. About 7¾ inches of rise to every 10 inches of run in real life. And there are also considerations for the overhang or the nose on the step OpenSCAD program without a user interface and hard-coded the parameters, and it worked. Nothing spectacular, just a solid structure with handrails. Now at least I had something. Seeing the need for a generator, I wrote a user interface for this simple project, allowing me to alter the basic parameters. I added a small option to change the solid base into a hole to make it look like stringers from the side. The tongue was created to provide a gluing surface for under a deck, but could be eliminated for a simple staircase for something like a front porch or back deck. When printing the stringer staircase, I had difficulty removing it from the build plate. It's delicate and kept breaking along the handrail holes or on the ends. I ended up printing it on its side and elevated 5 millimeters above the build plate on supports, which worked but did require some cleanup of the supports. You will probably need to enlarge the holes in the staircase in order to place the handrails. I used some numbered drill bits for this and worked gently. This generator is not great, but it's something, and I'm looking to improve it as time and ideas permit. My original roofing generator has gone through the most extensive evolution. First, I wanted to create rafters. The existing roofing generator allows for the specification of the building length, span, and pitch, so I used these to design a basic truss. The number of trusses can be specified, and the number of stringers connecting each truss as well. The sizes of the truss members is also under your control. If you want vertical corbels to attach to the wall, well, that functionality is available too. One day while picnicking, I observed that a park shelter is really quite similar to a building, just without walls. So I created a pillars option. You can specify the number of pillars you want. You can have more rafters than pillars, but do the math so that there will be the same number of rafters between each pillar. A purlin is just the big beam that goes across the top of the pillars and which supports the rafters. You can create angular supports to connect the pillars to the purlins, and these do look nice. I wanted a way to create supports for docks, loading docks, fishing docks, and maybe even back porches or balconies. Nothing fancy, just sets of legs with diagonal cross bracing between legs and stringers between the leg sets. So I wrote a generator for this task. Things worked out best when I printed leg sets horizontally and then assembled them in a fixture. This generator asks for the size of your 3D printer's build plate, the height and diameter of your pillars, the distance between leg sets, how long the entire string of leg sets will be, and what angle you want the bracing to be between pillars in a leg set. There are additional buttons to generate an assembly fixture. I started out designing the pier set as a single unit with vertical supports, but when I printed the unit, there were so many stringies, wisps of filaments between supports, that I changed my design and placed them flat on the build plate. But doing so made assembly more difficult, so I built a construction tool into the generator to place the supports vertically for alignment and gluing. While the fixture can be used directly, I decided to tape it to a piece of UHMW, ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene, and drill through the support tool to create my fixture. Why? To keep my fat fingers from gluing my supports to the fixture. UHMW is quite slippery and glue rarely sticks to it. Inspiration is everywhere. In Alton, Illinois, about 10 miles from where I live, is a brick apartment building overlooking the Mississippi River, and many units have steel balconies, which just begged for a balcony generator. Nothing fancy, just a rectangular base and simple railings in front of a sliding glass door. Well, I did create some options for the railing uprights and cables to suspend the balcony from the walls. As I write this clinic, this generator is still in development. Not too much more difficult will be to create an elliptical base for a balcony. Spacing the pillars will be difficult, as I still don't have a formula for evenly spacing them, but I'll think of something. One thing always leads to another, and I may expand on the concept to make something resembling a balcony for a southern plantation. That would require a generator for pillars. Pillars will probably have to wait for me to create a sliding glass door for the simple balconies. Operating garage doors are new for 2024. This generator creates two separate pieces, the door itself and a support with a hole for an axle in which the door rotates to open. There is a floor in which the support rests, and the support may be built in an existing structure. While the door may be a flat windowless piece, options are available for different window configurations. Single and double doors can be created by altering the width. I probably wanted a circus tent since I first got into model railroading. Cloth ones are available but are expensive, and I decided to give 3D printing them a try. This generator creates the end cones and a connecting straight section. The tension parameter controls the slope of the tent from the top of the skirt to the peak. Another option allows for the creation of a painting mask for the triangular sections of the cone. Real circuses often used sawdust to cushion the performance floor, and I eventually want to create a way to fix the tent components together in a solid piece to contain some of the sawdust-like media. This enhancement may have to wait until 2025. Now let's check out a generator called Construction Tools, and this one needs a bit more explanation. I sometimes found myself needing a triangular shape of a specific odd angle, either as a solid or as a whole. It is a real pain in Tinkercad to create a triangular prism to a specific angle without going through the sines and cosines of trigonometry, and I needed an easier way. So I created a construction tool generator for a solid wedge to any angle I desire. Problem solved. Other shapes like tubes and rectangles are provided for your creative use. Being able to create a rectangle to a specific length is particularly useful in creating setup blocks to a desired length for a chopping tool, like when I want to replicate cuts for the trestle bracing. I just measure for the lengths I want, create rectangular spacers, and bingo! I can set up my chopper and cut as many pieces of strip wood to the proper length anytime I want. The ceiling support is just a set of rectangles the size of a building interior to support a ceiling. I wanted such a thing to support a second floor in a barn, so I made a general solution. Just push it into place, glue it into the walls, and add a piece of styrene to create a support for a second floor. You can also repurpose a ceiling support as a hole to create a lip in a foundation to make adding walls easier and more secure. There will probably be new construction tools as needs arise. Let me know if you think of others that might be useful. And generators for construction tools or structural components are not the only things you can do with a 3D printer. If you attend my clinic on fire, you will see a small box I designed to hold ultrasonic vaporizers and LEDs for a neat effect. Boxes for other pieces of electronics are also commonly created using 3D printing. I like to tell folks that if you get good at 3D design and printing, you will make two things: unexpected useful objects and lots of friends who need them. All of my generators run under Microsoft Windows and can be downloaded from my website at http://dackm.github.io. We start by scrolling down to the Automating CAD Clinic. After a brief explanation of the concept, we come to a table showing all of the generator programs I have created, along with some I plan on creating in the future. Just above the table is an explanation of how to download the generators, so just click where it says "Click here." A download screen appears and you click on the download button at the right, the one that looks like a down arrow pointing into a rectangular channel. A zip file will be transferred to your download folder. Depending on your browser, you may get a pop-up saying the file is not commonly downloaded and may be dangerous. Well, that's true. This file is not commonly downloaded. But if you want my programs, you are going to have to trust me. So click on the arrow and then Keep to keep the zip file. Once the file is downloaded, open your Downloads folder and double-click on the automatingcad.zip file. You will see a list of generator executable files. I suggest that you create a new folder and extract them all to this new folder. Then use your virus scanning software and scan the new folder. Or you could just double-click on one of the executables to launch it straight away. The first time you attempt to launch a generator, Windows Defender may try to block the program because it does not recognize me as a commercial software publisher. No matter, just click on the More Info area and then on Run Anyway, and the generator will launch. You only need to do this once for each generator program. And there you have it. You are up to date on all my generators. I am using my creations to enter NMRA celebration or contests and hopefully garner merit awards toward my AP Structures certificate. But can you do the same with my generators? Probably not. You certainly could not claim to have designed the components yourself, and points for scratch building would be hard to justify for anyone other than myself because I did the hard work. But if you can't create something using a generator, call it a kit, or kit bash the components with other parts and super detail it, you might have a shot. Just be honest about how you created the basic components. But feel free to have fun creating background, foreground, or whatever structures suit your fancy. Just for grins, here are some structures I created for entry in my division's November 2024 annual meet and celebration, each of which used one or more components created by a generator. The walls of STEM's Florist were created using the generator for brick walls, The front wall is standard bricks. The back and one side wall are construction blocks, and the side wall with the windows is a composite of bricks and blocks. The roof was made with the arched roofing generator. I made the window frames, doors, and roof details in Tinkercad. I printed the walls individually and flat on the build plate, then glued together. The roof was printed standing on its edge. All were printed at a standard layer height of 0.20 millimeters. Here we have an abandoned Church's Chicken restaurant about 5 miles from my home. I used the basic building generator with the board and batten option for the wainscoting and the lean-to. Both of these components were applied to the outside of a hollow rectangle and composited in Tinkercad. The roof is a separate piece, started as a solid rectangle, with board and batten pieces added as slanted objects to disguise the roof details, which I created manually in Tinkercad. Still to be added are roof details and some ladders. This is the Tidewater house, modeled after the former home of friends. It features multiple intersecting roof panels, a working garage door, and multiple custom-designed windows, including 2 bay windows. Inside is a staircase and hardwood flooring. All of these were created using my generator technology. I even created the dormers as small basic buildings with clapboard siding and tab shingles, then inserted into the main roof, thus combining multiple simple objects into a more complex one. The dormers were intimidating at first, but fairly simple once I got over my fears. Still to be added are second floor walls and some plumbing fixtures I downloaded from Thingiverse. Finally, here is a greenhouse, a rough approximation of one of several such structures in a nursery in the next county. The base is made with the bricks generator, sized for construction blocks, and the canopy was done with the arched roofing generator, using the vertical wall option and printed on its edge. I used a construction tool generator to make a lip on the top surface of the construction blocks into which the canopy would seat. The end pieces were created using the basic building's board and batten option. I then used the arch roofing generator's roof mask option to create the end walls so they mated perfectly with the arched roof. The heater was created with the louver generator. The movable doors are created in Tinkercad, and the irrigation pipes and planter boxes were drawn manually in Tinkercad. Admittedly, it took a few iterations to get it right. As I write this, I still have 2 months to create a few more structures before the meet, and I hope to add a covered bridge, an enhanced circus tent, produce stand, log cabin, barn, and radio station, complete with an antenna tower. Generators will be used at least partially in all of these to make the models more precise and faster to create. Hopefully, a few will qualify for NMRA Achievement Program Merit Awards. So what might be coming in the future? In addition to staircase upgrades, awning options, and other general improvements, I would like to create windows in shapes other than rectangles, probably round tops or peaked for churches, and bay windows. Fencing of various kinds too. Window cornices would be a nice enhancement as well, and perhaps custom designed storefronts for commercial buildings. I gotta get window pediments online, and I just must add hip roofs, gutters, and downspouts to the collection ASAP. I also like to learn how to do texture mappings for stonework as well. When I first developed the concept back in 2022, it was my intent to create a video for each generator, wherein each option would be explained and demonstrated. That never happened, and the only documentation for them is this clinic. Users are left to their own trial and error to learn what can be done, and the lack of better documentation is an embarrassment to me. I hope to start creating training tutorials in the next 12 months. Wish me luck. To conclude, if you have a 3D printer and want to create some custom buildings, you now have some new tools to do so, all without learning CAD. If you don't yet have a 3D printer and have even the slightest interest in the technology, I encourage you to take the plunge. And when you do, give my generators a try. I think you will be glad you did. Thanks for listening.
Dave, are you ready for some questions?
Yes, let's see what we got.
Are these generators available in Windows only?
Yeah, I am a Windows kind of guy. Uh, I'm not Linux, I'm not Mac, so I originally did these for myself. So that's the genesis of all of this. But if you're not a Windows person, you can probably pick up a used computer pretty easily. So I never felt that it was something that I was going to do for the world.
Cool. So, how about a next release in a web version?
We've talked about that. But I'm more, of a client based guy. So again, I never thought about it. But if I found a friend who maybe could help me down the road, maybe that might happen down in the future someday.
Wink, wink, wink. I've heard that OpenSCAD is pretty slow.
Yeah, it can be slow. And I've been doing a lot of work lately with bricks and shingles. So I might have a wall that might have 8,000 bricks on it, and it was taking maybe about an hour. And my machine's maybe about 2 years old, and I run under Windows 10. Uh, but an hour in OpenSCAD was kind of painful. Then I heard that if I go to the nightly update, which maybe is maybe 2 days old rather than 2 years old, and it screams. Something that was taking me an hour to render, now I can render in under 10 seconds. So if you are into OpenSCAD, go back to those downloads and download the nightlies. Do it once, and you got something then that's really fresh. And boy, it screams now. I'm really happy with my throughput now.
Do you use any other CAD packages?
I use Tinkercad for compositing. I think you saw that a little bit inside the video. When I do a basic building, I do four walls, and I got to punch holes and things like that in it. But I've tried SketchUp, and it's too complicated for my simple brain. So just for what I am doing on structures, Tinkercad is all I use. Although we have talked offline sometimes about uh, doing figures in Make Human and posing them in Blender. And somewhere down the road, I think that'd be the next place I would go.
Cool. And then my last question is a little bit technical. Um, does the generator know how much room I have to print with, or what happens if the print is too big for my printer?
The generator doesn't know anything about your printer except for one of them, uh, and that's the one where I do peers supports for buildings and things like that. So I've had an issue lately where I want to do a building which is 90 feet wide,
Wow,
and that's too big for my printer. I can do it on the diagonal, but it really gets close. So this thing, if you would look at it, is an HO, is 90 feet wide, and so what I ended up doing is doing it in two parts. This brick generator lets me do ragged right and ragged left. So I did one of each and split it in a good spot and then glued it together, and it works. So that's how I'm getting around things which would normally not fit on my printer. You can play games. You can try to slant it in 3 dimensions. That takes a lot of supports.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
this has worked fairly well for me, and I just got it glued together today. So I'm kind of happy with what that's going to let me do.
Last question. What kind of glue did you use there?
Oh, what was this here? Uh, Not Bondine, but the other one that works a little bit faster. Um, oh, I can't even remember what it's called right now. But yeah, I just cut a little slot in here where it overlapped with the
Hmm.
bricks, and then I put a support in there and glued it together. And so far, it's holding together. It's less than 24 hours old, but I think it's going to be okay.
One more question from the audience. Are the generators scale specific?
They are scale independent. You tell me that you want the thing sized in millimeters, and I am scale agnostic. You just tell me how big you want the thing to be in millimeters.
Cool. Well, Dave, your video broke up 2 or 3 times. We're going to re-upload it when we put the clinic together all by itself. Your own personal channel will also have a copy of the video. And I think in a previous video you mentioned where that link is. I didn't see it today. Um, so people could find you there and watch the whole thing uninterrupted and hopefully at a better volume. So we are still working out what this volume problem is because it's yelling in my ears and everybody else is at 100%. So sorry about that. And Dave, thank you very, very much for yet another great clinic about 3D printing.
Thank you very much. I'm having fun. I hope the audience will use my tools and have fun too. Thank you.
Cool. See you soon.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. It's Marty here over in Studio 2 down under, and we've got our final clinic of the day. We've got Lee Colkins here, the president of the Engage Events Group, I believe NEG stands for. I should know, I think I'm a member, but anyway. He's the current self-proclaimed record holder of the largest N-scale layout, I think, or the Emperor of Evanston, I think they call him at the moment. And he's also the holder of the largest N-scale toothpick in the world. But anyway, so we'd like to welcome today for our final clinic, Lee Colkins from the very deep south of Canada. Over to you, Lee.
Hey, thanks, Martin. So I'm from northern Idaho. I live in Post Falls. And I model an N-scale, and I do Fremo N, which is a N-scale modular standard. It's a freeform standard. And I've got a clinic today on modular layout design. So there's a lot of things to think about when you're designing a model railroad, and there's a lot of things to think about when designing a modular railroad. Some of the things that are in common is we have to know how much space we have to build in. We have to know what kind of layout we're going to design, and for modular layouts, we need to know what kind of modules we have coming, how many operators we want to attend, and what LDEs do you have. Now, what is an LDE? Well, it's a layout design element, and Tony Koster talked about that a little bit, and I pulled this from the NMRA's website. And an LED can be either just a big multitude of things. It can be an industry area, a town, passing sidings, branch lines, yards, servicing areas, balloon tracks. There's lots of different prototypes for LDEs in the world. And if you're freelancing a railroad, LDEs have the same things. They can be different things. They can be all those different things. So in Fremo N, a lot of people build LDEs, layout design elements, or certain areas. And Fremo N is designed to really be based on a prototype, but there's a lot of guys that do proto freelance. And we run on Code 55 Rail. We encourage prototype design. Everything is run off of DCC, and we always try to run rolling stock that meets the NMRA standards. So for Fremo modules, we've got several different kinds of modules. These I call scenery modules. They are the pieces that go between those LDEs, those areas that we like to model. And we can run curves or straights, and the curvature really doesn't matter, and the lengths really don't matter. Fremo N is a single track standard, but recently we have adopted a double track option. So there are some double track modules that do exist. The big curly Q one is maybe you could do like the Williams Loop in California or the Tehachapi Loop in California. That's all possible with Fremo N on a modular scale. So here is an example of a Fremo N curve. This is a 45-degree curve. It's just very plain. It's a field, and in the background is a 60-degree curve that's treed. Here's a bunch of different 45s and some 60s and 90s all linked together. And these are just scenery modules that are nice to have between those big LDEs that we see so often. Here's a really nice canyon, and this is just a single track. Here's a double track 45-degree curve that shows what the double track will do. This gentleman did a curve through a mountain pass, and we've got a ravine on one side and a steep mountain edge on the other. And you don't have to be playing with your modules. You can build them up high and put in freeway overpasses and roads. And then we get into these industry modules that so often people like to build. And I've got a curve in there that's got a siding. We've got one in here that's just a big passing siding, which is a prototype of a passing siding that's in California or Oregon, just south of Portland. We've got a granary on a curve, and we've got another one which is a DoD yard that a guy up here in Spokane is currently building. So here's some real-world examples of some of these industry modules, these LDEs. This one's got a branch off of it to service more industries. This is all big one module set that Kevin in Utah has built. This is a module set that I've had for a long time. It's got a passing siding and 3 or 4 industries on it and a 2-track yard at one end for storing cars to service the granary that's in the background there. Now, FremoN is a point-to-point railroad, or a point-to-loop, or sometimes a loop-to-loop, or sometimes a loop-to-loop-to-loop-to-loop, like we did in Evanston. So there's lots of different loops and lots of different ends and different ways you can do things. So this is just a simple loop, and it's got one passing siding. It allows you to park a train or have 2 trains into the loop and at different times. You can park a train there if you got to run to the bathroom. Generally, you don't park a train there for a long period of time, as it's very useful to have a loop down at the end of the layout. This is a staging yard loop. It does have 4 tracks. When this one's in operation, we try to keep 2 tracks open at all times, and the other 2 can be used for staging. This is a single track loop. It kind of shows what you can do with a little bit of elevation change. That's a 87 car grain train. You're looking at the beginning and the end of that loop all together. And this is a stub end yard that ends in a boat, so you can ship the cars by boat off to another area. And this guy also has a Y, and this is off of one leg of the Y, and he uses it to turn trains around and store trains. And the next we get into yards, and if we start at the top right-hand corner, that's a staging yard. It's just used for staging trains, and those are prototypical staging. There's one actually 5 miles from my house here up in Rathdrum. The one below it is a St. Mary's yard that I'm currently building downstairs in my basement at the moment. And the next one down below that, the big three-sided passenger yard there, that's a Omaha yard, and DeBob is a friend of mine over in the Omaha, Nebraska area, and he has built that one, and it was in Evanston with us this year. The top left-hand yard is Avery, Idaho, which is an old Milwaukee Road yard. And the big triangle one in the middle is actually a prototype yard. I don't remember where it's from. A friend sent me an image and said, I bet you can't draw this. And I said, I bet I can. So there it is. It's all drawn and ready for him should he ever win the lottery and is able to build that yard. So here's a couple of the yards. This is more of a staging yard, but it is very scenic and set up. It doesn't have any yard leads, so you can't do much switching on it, but you can park 8 trains in there, 9 if you use the passing siding on the double track main. Here's another yard. This is a friend of mine in Nebraska. It does have a triple track on the far end there at the back of the picture, so you can actually switch this yard and build trains because it does have a yard lead that goes down the center and is available to switch cars and shunt cars around the yard. This is a small passenger yard from Silicon Valley. Just shows it's got two sidings to park passenger trains, and then the freight main runs on the left-hand side of the module there. This is just a straight staging yard. It's a stub end yard. It does have 1 track that runs through, but all the yard tracks end at the end of the module. It's just made for building trains on the layout and parking trains if you need to go to the bathroom or go talk to someone or go home for the day. So this is actually Speed's yard that he built for the Dallas convention last year. It's a good top view of all the yard tracks in there. The tracks on the left-hand side are the main line, and then a passing siding and a runaround. And then we've got 5 or 6 yard tracks. We use that quite a bit at the Operations Roadshow, and we used that a lot in Evanston, Wyoming last summer. or this past summer. This is a staging yard that we also used at the Operations Roadshow. We staged a whole bunch of trains in that yard so we could run them to the other end of the layout. Now we got car cards showing what trains are which ones, so that when the operator gets their orders, they could go grab the train and take it around the layout. This is another little yard, and it is used just to service one industry. So a train will come in and drop cars off at this yard, pick up cars, and head out, and then the local switcher will come, pick up the cars, and switch the industry. This is one of our stub end modules that also incorporates a 4-track yard into it. Now we get into the junction modules. Previously, all those other modules have 1 or 2 ends on them. These have 3 or more, and we have simple ones like you've got there is the spur junction. It's got 3 ends, but there's no auto reversing section. There's no reversing, no way to turn a train around. The big T1 has a way to turn a train around, and then the crossover on the right hand side, you can't turn a train around. It's just a way to go from one side, you can get to 2 other directions. The one at the bottom is set up for a branch line with a little bit of a stage or a transfer yard there at the bottom. So that incorporates a transfer yard and a junction. Now the top left one is one that I own, and it's a little more complicated, and I'll talk about it more here in a minute. This is a standard T junction. We've got a single track. This person has put signals on this one, and it's just one track on 3 sides of the module. There's that big cross one. It's out of Silicon Valley area, Sacramento area as well. It's a prototype of a binary junction where I think it's the Western Pacific and the Southern Pacific cross outside of, I think, Sacramento, California. This is my plumber junction. So we've got a double track main line and a single track main line in this junction. And here's a broader view of it. So when you've got junctions, you need to understand how the track works on these junctions and where the auto reversing sections are on the junctions if they have one. So for plumber, we do have a double track main line that runs across the bottom of the layout. And then we've got that single track main line that runs across the top of the junction. The auto reversing section on this module is the branch line that goes to Worley on the Union Pacific Worley line. The Union Pacific Worley line can actually get to all 4 sides of this junction, whereas the Union Pacific Plummer line can only go to the Union Pacific Worley line. So if you've got a train that's coming in from the Plummer Union Pacific, you can't go to the Union Pacific Wallace or the St. Mary's or to the St. Mary's Plummer. So you've really got to understand how the junction works, because you don't want to have a whole bunch of your railroad off at the Union Pacific Plummer and off at the Union Pacific Wallace and cause a huge traffic jam. I don't know, maybe you do. Maybe you want to have the operators have issues where they have to go down to the Union Pacific Worley to turn their train around and head back out to go to Plummer or to St. Mary's on the St. Mary's line. So this is a fun module to implement in setups. So now that we've got all of these different types of LDEs, how do we use them in FreeMoN? So this is a layout that we're going to build up here in Spokane next week. No, it's in 2 weeks, so it's in September. We've got a large industries, a transfer yards. We've got some double track in there. We've got passing sidings and industries and a branch line. We've got our staging yard and more industry areas. Only thing we're missing is a freight yard to do switching in, and I'm currently building that downstairs, so hopefully by next fall it should be operational and we can include that in the railroad. Now here's a basic layout. This is how we started it up here in Spokane. 1 passing siding and 2 curves. Now with this, you can run 2 operators. You can run 2 trains and run them back and forth, and A is an LD. It's a layout design element. And we want to space those layout design elements far enough apart that your locomotive isn't in one town while your caboose is in the town that it just left. So for this railroad, we're probably running 3-foot trains so we can actually get around on the 90s. There's not much to do here. You run back and forth. Now we get somebody else that comes into the group. We build a couple more corners, and I don't recommend building 90-degree corners. It's funner to build odd angles. You can do that in FreeMoN. But you've got a guy that comes in and builds module B, and now you've got module A, or LDEA and LDEB. And we take and we work with those, and you can actually run 3 operators on here without much trouble. You have one operator that's in the A running around his train, switching the caboose to the other end. Then you got a guy over in B who's switching the industries, and you've got a train that just left B to go into A. And then when he gets there, the train that is in A can head over to B, and you can run 3 operators, and everybody's moving most of the time. We've done this at a couple shows, and I'll show you those layouts here in just a moment. So as you continue to grow and think about how your layout goes, say now we've got somebody that goes, okay, I want to build a junction. So he builds a junction on D. And we got another guy that says, I'd like to do a yard. So he builds C. Sorry, my throat's getting dry. And then we've got, just another straight module that someone decided to build. It's a little bit of an S-curve. Now we can turn a train around, and we can have someone switching in the yard and building trains and tearing down trains to go service the industries at B. And you can go run around your train in A. And as you continue to grow and you look at your different parts and your pieces, now let's add another passing siding, and someone decides to build a loop. So now our point-to-point railroad has gone to a point-to-loop railroad. So we've got a yard, a couple LDEs in the middle, some scenery modules there to break up the LDEs, and we get to the loop. We can turn a train around and head back to the railroad, back on the railroad. We continue to grow, and more people come, and we get something. Somebody says, oh, I want to build another loop. So we build and add another loop onto the Y there. Now, where's our auto reversing section? Our auto reversing section really depends on where the builder of D put it. If it was me, I would put it on the leg where the B module is at, and the auto reversing section would start at A or D and go all the way through B. And so there'd be about 12 feet of auto reversing section. On the end of the yard there where C is at, I've got H. And H could be more industries. It could be a locomotive servicing facility. And this is all just make-believe anyway at the moment as we talk about designing. And when you start to get enough operators that you can run 6 or 7 trains or 8 trains or possibly even 10, we need to start looking at a place to store a train if you need to go to the bathroom, because you really can't store it on the passing sidings because we need those for when we're running. So I've put in a staging yard where I is at, and moved the A over to next between the G, because I love to have a passing siding before a reverse loop. It just helps facilitate getting a train into the loop and the next train into it. So this is a basic railroad using 5 or about 8 or 9 different LDEs, layout design elements in the layout, and putting enough space between those LDEs so that you're not in the same town as someone else, or your train isn't in 2 towns at the same time. Now this layout will probably run about 8-car or 8-foot long N-scale trains, which is about 20 cars. So it'll actually hold some decent sized trains. Now I've done a lot of layouts over the years, some really, really big ones and then some really small ones. When I started out, I was helping with the Portland NMRA show for the FreeMoN layout, and that's where I started to learn how to design modules. And I was really just there observing and helping, and I did a little bit of work on that one. But the rest is where I started to grow and learn more about how to utilize the space and the modules that are there. So this is the first layout that we set up here in Post Falls in the library. It's just a little point-to-point railroad, and we have passing sidings on the ends. So that limits our trains to about 3 feet long. But we ran with 4 people on this railroad for 2 days, running trains back and forth and doing switching at the industries on both ends. And it was nice that we had the long passing sidings there because we could put 2 trains in the passing siding at a time and run around and stage stuff. And it's a 3-track passing siding at that time. So there's our picture. It's a little grainy. I didn't have a good camera at the time, but that's the first layout of the Inland Northwest Fremo N up here in Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls and Spokane. Then we moved on and I built a loop off of my Y there. We built 3 90-degree corners. And then I took the 2 5-foot modules and I pulled the switches out and combined them. And so now it's a 10-foot module and it'll hold an 8-foot train. And again, the 3 of us had fun running on that layout. So there's a picture of that layout. Apparently I was into passenger trains that day because there's a couple passenger trains and then my maintenance away trains there in the background. As we continued to grow, more people brought modules and I continued to expand, and we went back and we tried another point-to-point with Ys at both ends so you could turn your locomotive around and do a little bit more. And you see the start of a staging yard in the bottom left-hand corner. I'd started the yard. I hadn't finished laying track, but I had the main line in so that we could use it for this show. And there's the picture of that one. We ran about 5 people on that layout, running short trains again. That's my son in the white shirt there. He's gone and moved out now. And then someone showed up and said, hey, I want to build another loop. So he started working on the loop on the left-hand side. And I took my little loop that I had built and I expanded it and I put in a passenger yard and a freight yard and a staging yard. And now we can really start to run some long trains because his loop would hold 24-foot trains and my loop would hold almost a 50-foot train as we start to expand and grow. So there's that layout. He hadn't shown up with the loop yet by this when I took the picture, but his loop went off the edge to the right-hand side. The next event, we had Plummer Junction up and running. So now we can run 4 different legs off of Plummer and really start to expand and grow. And we've got the big yard loop, and then we've got Ed passing siding, and Ed had another passing siding. He came up from Portland. Plummer has double track main lines, so we're able to utilize that for another passing siding. And we can run 10-foot trains on this layout fairly easily with about 4 or 5 guys running 10-foot long end scale trains with lots of switching opportunities off the branch lines. And so, and there's the big loop with the staging yard at that event. And now we've hit the point where we needed that staging yard. The problem with my big yard was it's very hard to handle, and those 90-degree corners were hard to work with. They were just big and unwielding and made it difficult to move them and set them up. And so I got rid of those corners and I started over. And a friend of mine built the staging yard here, and we've picked up about 10 more guys since we started, and we're now at about 15 people running trains on this layout. You know, we've got that DOD yard, a couple other little yards, the staging yard, some industries, a branch line down at the bottom, and 2 good loops. We actually have 4 loops in our group, but 2 people weren't able to make it and bring their loops, so I left Plummer Junction home, and we didn't use it for that event. Now, if we bring in Plummer Junction and play with some other modules, now we really get some interesting things, and we have a lot of branch lines available to run small trains on. We can run about 16-foot long mainline freight trains on this layout with about 15 people running at the same time. And again, this is single track with double track options, so there's a lot of parking and sidings and waiting and communicating with people around you as you try to navigate the railroad. So there's that layout set up in Spokane, Washington. So Fremo N has the ability to blend itself to different ways. And at the beginning, I talked about how you need to know what your space looks like. So I was in Deschler, Nebraska several years ago with some friends over there. Spring Creek hosted a Fremo N and Fremo HO layout, and we were told we got the little room on the top, but we could, if we could figure out a way, sneak through the door into the closet, which is the bottom left-hand side. And we found out that the HO guys weren't using all of their rooms, so we snuck through another door and ran down the side of the HO layout, which would be to the right of the image here. And so we started to look and see how we could do that and look at the modules that we had available and where the doors were at. We needed a really accurate measurement of where all the doors were. And it worked. So there is that one loop, and we're looking into the storage room, and you can see the layout right at the bottom of the screen in the HO room, and it bends around out through the back there into the N-scale room where we were supposed to be. We kind of wiggled all over and used the curves that were available to manage the space and use the space to our advantage, and made it through all the double doors and left enough room for people to get through. So sometimes you have more space than you know what to do with, and you can really spread the layout out. This is the Salt Lake National Train Show layout, and we based it around Plummer right there at the right-hand side, and we started to grow legs off of it. And we branched out to the Biney Junction, and we grew more legs off of that. And we had about 40 people able to run trains fairly regularly. We've got two big yards, one at the top of the screen and one at the bottom of the screen, that would stage 16 trains between the two of them. And it ran fairly well, and it worked really well. And we spaced out the LDEs with the scenery modules so that you could have your train only in one city at a time. And here's an image of that layout that we built there. And really it's managing your space and figuring out what modules you have and sitting down and playing with it and working with it and really striving to find what best utilizes the space and what best utilizes the modules, what keeps everybody happy so that they can run trains. This is the other end of that layout. When we were in Reno, Nevada at the N-Scale convention last summer, we had the opportunity to build in a room that wasn't square. So the modules on the left-hand side were right up against, they were about 6 feet from the diagonal wall that ran down that way. And we wanted a layout that was really set up for doing operations. And so I've named the branch lines on here because the trains would be called to go service particular branch lines. And we set up a big switching yard at the top of the layout to organize the trains and organize the locals, and that's where the dispatcher was for the railroad, and the yard master ran things from there, and we kept things moving fairly smoothly as we worked around the railroad. Again, we've spaced out the passing sidings with the single track, spaced out the industries so that we're not all jammed up in one side. Now, when we got to Dallas for the national convention last summer, we were asked to provide a layout for the Operations Roadshow, and that's a partnership that we're going to continue doing between Fremo N and the Operations Roadshow, and the N-Scale Events Group will be in Novi next summer. But this is the layout that we provided for the convention attendees. We have a staging yard at each end and a loop at each end. And then we continue around through some long passing sidings and some single track and a passing siding and single track and a passing siding, and industries scattered throughout, so that we could keep 12 operators from Operations Roadshow running at all times on the railroad. And so this layout will handle more than 12 operators, but that's what Operations Roadshow and we decided to do at that time. Now, 3 years ago, we decided to go play in Evanston. And this is an opportunity where we had more space than we had modules. So we were able to just wiggle our way and wind every way through. This building is 15,000 square feet. We're able to use everything that everyone brought. This is about 1,200 linear feet of modules. And again, we look in here and we see all the different layout design elements scattered around, and it's set up so that, again, you're not in one town and the other town at the same time with an appropriate length train. So we limited it to about 16-foot long trains, and we had 50 operators operating on this layout while we were in Evanston in 2021. Now for 2024, we decided to go play in Evanston again. And here is the room laid out. The green squares on this room are columns in the room. This is an old machine shop. The two lines that run across the top there, those are actually the rails that are still in the ground in the concrete. And if you look on here, I've started to lay things out the way I think we should be going. I grabbed the complicated modules first. I have 3 4-sided junctions that were coming. One of them is plumber junction, one of them is binding junction, and the third one on the right hand side is a junction that Gordy Robinson brought over from Orkney, Scotland, and it's just across, and we wanted to utilize that. And then I've got 4 big yards that are 5 yards that we laid out. One of them is a passenger yard, it's in green. We've got Speed's yard in the middle, we've got the Silicon Valley yard at the top, the Inland Pacific yard at the bottom, and the Brigham City, Utah yard towards the upper left. And at the bottom left, we've got a 35-foot long passing siding module. It's a big module, so I decided to put it in there. And once I had this in here, where I wanted stuff really to go, I had to start grabbing other modules that people had decided to bring and connecting the dots and utilizing the space as best as we can. Because at this event, unlike in 2021, we had more modules than we had space. So I had to do a lot of moving. And you notice those pieces that I just showed you are in roughly the same area where I started with them. They've moved several feet in all directions. But we ended up building this layout, and in reality, this isn't the layout that I designed before we left. I left about 2 weeks before the event, and between the time that I left and the time that I got there, I had 5 people say that they couldn't come, and so we had to redraw the layout 5 different times. And in fact, at 3 o'clock on Wednesday, we realized that one of the loops we were expecting and a couple other modules weren't going to make it, and so we ended up redrawing the layout while we were building the layout. And so this is an as-built version of what the layout looked like when it was in Evanston. And all the little different LDEs all scattered around this layout. We've got passing sidings and junctions and industries and yards and stub ends and loops and double track and single track, just all these different parts and pieces. I never actually made it all the way around the yard, around the entire railroad. I haven't met anybody that had, but this railroad will support about 100 different operators because of all the different areas you can run a train. And we had people come from, I think we had 68 module owners that brought pieces and parts. And this is not something that I threw together in one day. This is something that started back in January. I cleared the map and I started placing those big pieces that I knew were coming. And then I started laying things in and laying things in. And as more people would register, we'd add their modules to the railroad and move stuff over here and move stuff over to the left and to the right. And slowly it worked its way through. And so this is probably revision number 105 by the time we got there. It's just like designing a model railroad for your basement or for your spare room. You have a plan that you start with, but the plan that you start with doesn't necessarily look like what you actually built by the time you're done. And it's really a lot of parts is just being aware of your space and the space that you have and the space you need for aisles. And so modular layout design really incorporates understanding your modules, your space, and what the people that are coming with the modules and are coming to run on the railroad want to see and want to run on. So here is a picture of Evanston from 2024, the monstrosity that we built. And this isn't just me, this is all those 110 people that registered to come and believed in what we did and were there to work and make it work. And it's their love for the hobby and for Fremo and their love for each other and the helpfulness that they had that made this event possible and made my job a lot easier in designing this railroad. So you can start with what you've got here, and eventually you can make it to something that uses different types of modules. I've been designing modules for a long time. I do everything on AutoCAD. It's a spendy license, but I get AutoCAD free from work. And so I can use that as long as I stay there and work. So, Martin, does anybody have any questions?
Okay, there's a few questions there in the chat. That was brilliant, and I must attest that was I actually made it out to Evanston this year, and I think I managed to get from one end of the layout to the other, and it took me, I think the shortest time was about 4.5 hours, and that was to get from Bob's Yard down around one of the loops, then back up through Omaha Station again, and then across to the other side of the layout. And I think the longest it took me to do that was 6 hours on Saturday. But yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. But anyway, let's have a look over in the chat and see what we've got here. I'll just scroll this back here. Boom, 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 boom. Let me get back further. Okay, so there's a lot of comments saying it's really cool. There was, oh, yep, someone's cheering, ho ho woohoo, modules. So yeah, that was from Linda. Tony, yeah, and yeah, Tony Ryan was saying I'm here to harass Lee. So
Yeah,
come
sounds
on,
like Tony.
give us the questions and we'll harass him. So apparently in one of your slides you spelt modules mosules.
Yeah,
So
it was on the first slide.
yeah, so someone picked that up and they want to know what is a module. So
I want to know too, so we'll figure it out later.
Go a bit further around. Okay, let's go over here. So setting up a whole layout. If someone invites your group to bring a layout, do you know how little space you must have, or do they need to tell you how much space you could have? So in other words, they need to tell you how little space you're gonna have to set up, and you've got to stay in that, or do they ask you how much space they need to give you?
It depends on the event. So sometimes you show up and they've only got a 20 by 30 area for you. And other times they say, okay, how much do you need? When we were in Dallas, they asked us how much we needed. And sometimes you're limited by the size of the room, and sometimes you're limited by the size of the layout.
Right. Tony is saying using two-man crews doubles the participation fund. Yep.
Yeah, we did that at Evanston on the operation times. We ran a two-man cruise.
And remember, supposed to emulate branch line operation, shorter trains, more switching, less mindless running. So, yeah,
Yep.
they were saying about having more branch lines on there means you got more switching and less round and round. But I must admit, I was running a passenger train the whole weekend at Evanston, so.
Yep, you were running the yellow Santa Fe.
That's right. Yeah, I was running interference with
Yep.
all the freight. Yeah, so.
Interference is always fun to run. I was running a maintenance away train to run interference, so.
Although I must admit we did have a grumpy dispatcher in the Central Division, and because I couldn't understand his accent, he
It
put
was
me in
just
a
Gordy. It's okay.
yeah he put me in a siding for about an hour. So yeah.
I just waved my president of the railroad card and he let me through.
Ah, right, okay. Yeah, no, he just told me because I didn't listen to him, I could pull into the siding and wait. So anyway, that's another story altogether.
Yep.
Speed was saying, but when we see bigger layouts, we want to run long trains. Is that true, Lee? So when there's a bigger layout, the trains always get bigger.
So we were going to try to do 30 to 40 foot trains at Evanston, but those are two of the loops that dropped out on me at the last moment. So we really need to keep our train lengths down to fit what the railroad will handle. So if you only have 12-foot passing sidings, you can't run two 16-foot trains. So your longest trains are really dictated by the length of your passing sidings.
Okie dokes. There's another question popped in here. Is there a good ratio for single industry sidings, yards, and modules per layout? So, is there a good mixture, in other words, for industry and yards per layout?
I don't know. I just end up using what comes. So when we get to Novi, I'm going to have a less space than I have modules, and so we got to start picking and choosing and finding that ratio. So it's going to be a learning curve for me as we navigate this for the next couple months and get ready for Novi with the Operations Roadshow. So.
Okay, and I guess being as that's going to be for the Operations Roadshow, there's going to be a fair bit of industry and fair bit of switching inside that particular layout compared to, say, others that you've put together, which have been more entertainment for the public.
Possibly.
And Tony's saying at some point, hopefully you'll put a presentation together on the DCC electrical problems that crop up with building layouts of this size. I must admit, when I got there, I was in the electrical crew. I don't know why. Apparently, I must know something about electricity. But anyway, yeah, that got me. I was going around setting the LocoNet cables up, and it's the first time I've ever gone with someone's layout where they've had 100-foot rolls of LocoNet cable. Usually in Australia, most of the layouts here have got 20 foot is probably about the biggest roll of LocoNet cable I think I've ever seen. But it was quite interesting the way the booster setups were done, and the Y switching to change the phases over if someone had wired their layout the wrong way around or a different way around. Can you elaborate on that? And will you be doing a clinic on the electricals?
I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. I'll talk with Tony. I know where he lives, so.
You have to rope some assistance in, but
yeah.
But no, like I said, it was quite enlightening looking. I mean, there's nearly 30 boosters I think used on that layout at Evanston.
Yeah, we had 30 boosters. We had lens boosters, Digitrax, NCE. We had a We had a TCS booster.
Yep.
And a TCS command stations. I think there was one more that we also used, and we had them all in the same layout, so all talking together.
Yes, I was quite amazed. I went round and took photos of all the boosters that I've used in my little presentations here on what happened at Evanston, and yeah, I noticed there was just about every brand. There was NCE, there was Digitrax, there was even an old lens booster
Yep.
there, and then I saw there was a CS 105 command station, the new ones from TCS in there as well, and yeah, I was quite amazed that all of them could talk to each other, and all of them seemed to cooperate with each other
Yep.
after they were the fine adjustments.
Yeah, I've got some friends in Silicon Valley and in California that understand electrical really well, and some friends in uh, Ohio that really know their stuff. And so we utilize their knowledge and their experience to make this run. And I've been talking with them about the electrical for 3 years or 4 years now for
Yep.
Evanston. So
So when your first layouts, at your first sojourns into putting these modular layouts together, how many boosters were you running on the layouts in the early days?
well, in Portland was the first layout. I think we ran about 6 or 7. I was brand new, first show I'd ever been to. And then when I started doing our layouts here, I was just using a Digitrax Zephyr. And then I got a hold of a Digitrax Empire Builder. And now I've got 3 Empire Builders, and then I've got a DCS 240 and a DCS 100, and I can utilize all of them. I use the 100 to run the accessory bus, and I run the DCS or the DB 150s for my power. And then the DCS 240 actually doesn't power the layout. It is just the command station that talks to the layout. It does not run any electrical to the actual track.
Okay, okay.
So we can't short the command station out.
Right, right.
We don't want to drop the entire layout. So it does not have any track power out of it.
One of the comments that I always get when I show people the photos from Evanston is I had a picture of the monitor that was set up with all the slots, and they said they don't think they've ever seen a DCC set up with so many slots with actual occupied and running locos in them. Usually the slots are full, but they're full of idle locos. In other words, people that have forgotten to disconnect from the system when they've walked away, but there were so many active connections, and to see so many throttles in Wi-Fi throttle as well in the Wi-Fi throttle server.
Yeah, so we were running JMRI just so we could track all that and keep an eye on it and clear it regularly, because JMRI will allow us to clear the slots that aren't being used. So if it's idle and the throttle's off, we can clear it. We tried to put it up on the projector, but the projector was broken. So they
Right.
had a 70-inch TV there, and we grabbed that and hooked it up to the computer so we could show everybody and watch it from a distance.
Yes, well, I got a couple of photos of that when it was just about chockers full. So yeah, that was a bit of an enlightenment to a few of the
Mhm.
people over here. They didn't think JMRI could hold that many slots, but
It
anyway.
will. So the newer version will talk to all 400 slots that the DCS 240 will run.
Yep.
The previous versions would only do 120. So I actually spent a lot of time trying to figure out how not to override things. I called Digitrax, talked to them on the phone. Really, there's 3 years of planning. We took what we learned at E21 and went through and figured out what could go wrong by going bigger.
Yes.
So spent 3 years doing research and talking with people and talking to my friends in Ohio and California and all over the United States. And I've got a friend up here named Frank Wilhelm. He does research and really is my biggest, I wouldn't say naysayer, but he finds the problems and says, what are you going to do about this? And then we'll go and find the solution and research it before we ever get there. So
Yes.
hopefully we don't run into a problem we're not expecting.
Yep.
Because if we
No.
can plan for all the failures we can think of, we can find ways to solve them.
No, that was great. Now the other question I had was you used LocoNet in the system, obviously, to do occupancy detection and communication between all the Digitrax components. But what was the signaling system that you used?
So we didn't use LocoNet to do occupancy detection. We only used the LocoNet to have the boosters talk to each other.
Right.
So the signaling system is the modular signaling standard MSS. I'm not really versed in it or understand it to the greatest. I know I have a basic knowledge of it, but there's a standard out there. It's called the modular signal standard. There's a couple companies that make boards to utilize that standard, and it's run on standard Cat5 cable between modules, so it's not running on the flat 6 that Digitrax uses. And so that's a separate command. That's a separate network, and it's I think it's a peer-to-peer network. So each node just broadcasts to the one downstream and says what it knows, and then the next one goes, okay, it knows this, and sends a signal back out to the next one downstream.
Because the signaling system was quite impressive on the layout at Evanston for something of that size, and seemed to work quite well. And so as I said, when I was going around connecting up all the LocoNet cables, I was, what's this other socket underneath these layouts for? So
don't cross those. It's bad news.
no. I was told make sure you put them in the right socket. So.
Yeah. So we had 5 or 6 sections of signal. The longest one was about 250 feet long, and it had double track and passing sidings in it, and a yard in the middle of it, and all the industries. It actually had a gauntlet track in it, built by Stephen Anderson. So.
Yes. Now the other question that has come up was on about when you join the modules together. Is there any specific method you use of joining the modules together? I know you have an end plate, but are there any joining tracks that or is it just?
We don't use fitter rails at all. The rails are filed flush to the end of the module. So you just clamp it, line up the rails and clamp it and go.
Okay. And it seemed to work quite well because I once it was all lined up and clamped, you didn't over the weekend. I never had any problems going from one module to another. It seemed to work flawlessly.
Yep, you do get a little bit of settlement, usually the first night when things cool down and warm up again, and we have to go through and the first guy on the layout hits the spots and we go adjust things. Every once in a while things adjust and come out of alignment, but you just pop the clamp off. I use vice grips. I don't use C clamps. Vice grips are much faster, especially if you got to put them on and take them off to adjust things.
Yes.
And you just adjust it and clamp it back together really quick, and off we go.
Right. Yep. No, that it seemed to work really, really well. I was impressed. The one thing I must admit, though, is I've never seen so many Milwaukee toolboxes gathered in one place at one time. I think there must have been every Milwaukee toolbox that's ever been made at Evanston.
Yeah. So one of the friends that we've got in California has all of his stuff in Milwaukee toolboxes. He's probably got 60 or 80 boxes. And we joke with him that we should have bought stock in Milwaukee before he bought all his toolboxes. So he's got every size imaginable of toolboxes, from the little tiny ones that are like 1.5 inches thick by 6 by a foot, and he puts 3 of the PSX circuit breakers in there.
Yes. Yep.
And then he's got the big boxes for all his cabling, and all my stuff is in DeWalt boxes and Hart boxes. So I'm using the same system. I just am not as financially viable to buy Milwaukee boxes as he was.
It was rather funny because when I got back to Australia, I had a little look around at, these Milwaukee toolboxes are really good for taking everything about. Then I saw the price of them in Australia, and I would say he probably has enough. If he sold those Milwaukee toolboxes in Australia, he could probably buy a small car. So
probably.
Yeah, they're not cheap. But anyhow, let's have a little look if we got any more questions that I've missed or gone over. It doesn't look like it. So that was fascinating. That was great. And I must admit, as being one of the people that came, 7,731 miles to get to Evanston, it was absolutely sensational. Though next time I come, I think I'll spend a couple of days in Salt Lake City before I go driving up that hill and run out of oxygen when I get up to the top. Thank goodness good old Walmart down the road had cans of oxygen that kept me going for the first day and a bit, but and then I was right. But yeah, I think I need to get accustomed to being so. I live right next to the ocean, and the biggest mountain in Australia would just be a small hill in America. So yeah,
Evanston is about 6,600 feet in elevation. So
yes.
you're not the first person that's been to a train show up there and had to head back to Salt Lake to recover. So yeah,
No,
happened to me.
that was brilliant, and thank you very much for your time today. And we shall move on, and we'll see you hopefully in Novi.
Thanks, Martin. We'll see you later.
See you, buddy. Ta-da.